Hello everyone and welcome. We are thrilled to be hosting Itır Erhart for our 101st episode of Mekan Konuşmaları. On behalf of everybody, I want to express our deep appreciation for accepting our invitation. But before we begin, I'm honored to introduce you, if you let us. Professor Itır Erhart studied English language and literature and philosophy at Boğaziçi University. She received her Master of Philosophy degree from Cambridge University and her doctorate degree from Boğaziçi University. She teaches courses on gender, media, human rights, and civil society at Istanbul Bilgi University, conducts research and acts as a consultant to the rector. She is one of the founding members of two social enterprises, Adım and Açık. She is an Ashoka Fellow, if I'm not pronouncing it wrong, and a member of Ashoka Turkiye Board, İnogar Board, İhtiyaç Haritası Associate, Theatre Cooperative Advisory Committee, and TEGV Board of Trustees. So again, thank you for coming here, and I will leave the stage for you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure being here. Thank you for the invitation. So today we'll be talking about reconstruction of a city, but also reconstructing lives. So when we go through disasters, we're not only reconstructing cities, right? We're also trying to reconstruct the lives that which are severely damaged. So I'll be talking about the Hatay case mostly because most of our efforts are focused in Hatay. But before I begin, I would like to briefly talk about with what hat I'm we were told I teach here, but I also am very much involved with civil society. But tonight, I will talk as a member of the İhtiyaç Haritası Cooperative, and we are very much involved with the rescue, relief, and then reconstruction efforts. So have you heard about İhtiyaç Haritası before? Anyone needs map, İhtiyaç Haritası? Is this the first time you ever hear about it? Okay, then I'll have to briefly talk about it. So İhtiyaç Haritası needs map was founded by Ali Ercan Özgür and Mert Fırat to remind us of the image culture, sharing culture in Turkey, but take this to a digital platform. So it's a platform cooperative. It was founded as a cooperative in Turkey. So there are people and NGOs and schools which need things, and there are others who can actually meet these needs. So it's a digital platform which combines them. So if you go to İhtiyaç Haritası and you log in as someone who will meet the needs, you will see all the needs all around Turkey. And then you can just decide to meet one, and the need is met from a local provider. So if say a school lacks a heating system, and you want to get a heating system, and the school is in Kars, so the need is actually the heating systems provided from the nearest manufacturer or provider in Kars. So it reduces carbon footprint, but also tries to make the local economy stronger. But during disasters, we also work as a disaster management group, like earlier relief efforts. So we have a lot of experience in that too. As you know, we went through several disasters the last few years with the Elazığ earthquake, what happened in Adana, all the forest fires. So we developed these muscles to actually run centers during disasters. So today I'll be talking about that, and we did this in partnership with İnogar. İnogar is also another cooperative, so the founding members are pretty much the same. It's also another social cooperative which runs several projects. I could talk about it if you have questions later, but we'll focus on Hatay and reconstruction, and also UNDP. So UNDP is one of our key partners in all these projects. Okay. The clicker doesn't work. I think it's the screen sharing issue. Okay, now it works. All right. So the first stage of disasters is, as you know, rescue. So we're not experts in rescue. We never get involved with that part of the story. And there are NGOs who do that. I'll be talking about that. There's a disaster management platform. But what we do is humanitarian aid, then creating living spaces, and then recovery and development. So today we're somewhere between these two, like between living spaces and recovery and development. So as we're still continuing to create living spaces, but we're also trying to focus on our recovery and redevelopment efforts. As you can imagine, we have a lot of shareholders. We don't do this on ourselves, but you can think of us as someone who manages this network, who asks for their help, who asks for their resources, and then connecting them. Of course, we work with municipalities and chambers of commerce. So it's never possible to do anything on your own. Just go to a disaster region and say, okay, I'm building something here. So you, of course, have to work with the local authorities, international NGOs, and we have several, I'll be talking about that, corporate partners, because when you're reconstructing a town, obviously you need electricity, and you have to work with an electricity provider. We couldn't do it on our own. Okay. So the first phase is humanitarian aid. This is a map of what we've done. So the very first morning, our friends, our colleagues and volunteers, the very first hours, they went to the earthquake zone. Some of them were closer. So some of them were in Adana, in other towns. So, but the very morning of the earthquake, they immediately went to the region. And what happened was, so when there's an earthquake or a disaster, first you have to find a secure space to bring in the goods which will be distributed. So if you just go there and stuff starts coming in, like food or sanitary equipment or other needs, there's a chaos. So what we do is every time there's a disaster, we go there, we secure someplace like a depot or a warehouse. And then we get the local data, like what is actually needed. Then we share them, and then they're sent to that depot, the warehouse, and then distributed from there. Because otherwise it's, as I said, total chaos. So if you don't know where you store things, if you don't already have volunteers who are prepared to do this work, it's chaos. So we learned about this through the years with the experience of disaster relief. So what we did was, the materials were collected in Istanbul, most of them were collected in Istanbul, labeled. So I was there. I didn't go to the earthquake region the first morning. So I went to Dastas, which is a culture and arts center in Ataşehir, and İhtiyaç Haritası and İnogar offices are there as well. So we turned that place into like a warehouse, literally. And everyone brought in stuff like anything you can imagine, from blankets to cat food, because we were constantly publishing the needs coming from the region. And then we were able to just separate them. So it worked like a huge coordination space. So some people would be here and it would say gloves for children. So everything was first separated. put in boxes, labeled, making sure they don't get wet. So we also covered them with some like plastic. So it was then loaded onto trucks and then sent to our local warehouses. And again, another set of volunteers were there waiting, then distributing the boxes and the stuff inside it. So anytime you need to stop me, please stop me, because for me, this is like something very natural. But if you have questions about these rescue and relief efforts, please let me know. So this is what we did in Istanbul. So the needs map really wants to actually, meet the needs, not just send anything to the region. That's why it's very important when we're doing this online through our online platform or physically in a disaster time. So we were receiving the needs, the lists from the region, and then announcing them and then sending only those items. Because sometimes, you can say, for example, heaters are needed, but if there's no gas there and they work on gas, there's no point literally sending them over there and you cannot store them there. Or every time there's a disaster, we face this problem of people sending, köpeği dışarı çıkarıyorlar. Stuff which cannot be used. Like when the disaster takes place, say in the winter, people tend to bring summer clothes because sometimes the reflex is to, I will just help out. And then whatever they find at home, they just dump somewhere. And then the volunteers spend a lot of time actually separating them. So we do this very well in our Istanbul or Ankara depots, but still there's several materials sent over to the region which don't meet any needs. So it's like summer clothes. It happened again. Every time, a disaster happens, all the volunteers say this is making our lives hell and we don't have enough storage place, but it happens. So volunteers still had to spend a lot of time just separating what is actually of use and what is not. So we had about, 100 volunteers working simultaneously in Istanbul and in our other depots. And then you have to always bring in technology because this earthquake covered a massive region, right? What we were used to, what we had experience in was a much smaller area. Say like an earthquake happens in Elazığ or a forest fire in Marmaris. So this was spread so widely. It was almost impossible for our volunteers to go in the region and ask everyone what they actually need. So we created a WhatsApp chatbot and we shared the links. So everyone would just say, someone would say, I need a tent, I'm in this village. We would confirm that need, and then the cars would leave our warehouse and take that specific item there. So we made use of technology during this earthquake. We learned about that. And this worked really well because there were obviously volunteers behind this operation, separating them or loading them, but this made our lives very easy because then we could actually hear from them, people who are in some distant maybe village and impossible to get there, sending the volunteers there asking about these needs, but then a motorcycle could actually deliver what is needed. So that was one phase of the relief efforts. Then we also, how shall I put it? We had this project, One Rent, One Home, which we created during the Izmir earthquake with Izmir municipality. So as you know, creating temporary living spaces is a must do, and we always do that, like these tent towns, container towns I'll talk about. But it's also important that there are many empty houses, many empty rooms, just trying to make sure like many people are actually relocated in these empty spaces. So again, we have a project. We brought this to life during the Izmir earthquake. So we started using it for the Hatay earthquake. This is how it operates. So everyone who has suffered the consequences of the earthquake is registered, right? So their building is, destroyed, demolished, causality. So they casualties. So we know about them. So these people actually enter the need. I need a house. And then Itır just looks at that and says, I can actually cover the rent of X. Or I actually have a house which is available. So again, the same system matching the needs with the people who need them. So I used this system during the earthquake too. So I paid the rent of someone in Hatay. So this was also happening simultaneously. So trying to receive tents, trying to order rents, bring more tents to the town, or sometimes, when we ran out of tents, actually starting new manufacturing operations to manufacture tents, but at the same time, trying to make use of the already available spaces, trying to move people into these spaces and or pay their rent if they were actually affected by the earthquake. So all these efforts were happening simultaneously. I mean, these I won't go in detail. You can go check for yourselves, like how these other projects work. So there is also something called an Afet platform, a disaster platform, which we founded during the Elazığ earthquake. Because what happens is every NGO is specialized in a certain area. So you could be specialized in food banking. So you may be very good in that. I could be an expert in prevention of violence. The other is a rescue person. The other is a fields person. So, but if we go to the field and start doing everything by ourselves, there is lack of coordination, and this is not an efficient way of using our efforts. So what we did is we got together several NGOs who were actually in the field and started a platform called Disaster Platform, Afet Platformu. And many more NGOs joined along the way. So this makes life very easy because we know that, for example, TOG has an amazing network of volunteers. So TOG has clubs in universities. So the moment TOG sends out a call, students, TOG volunteers from all around Turkey actually can come to the region. So the disaster platform used TOG's network and amazing number of students who are part of the TOG network as volunteers, asking for volunteers to come to the region. So each and every one of them has a special expertise. So çorbada tuzun olsun, again, a food bank. TİDER the same. So everyone did their share of the operation. And we work under this platform together. So İhtiyaç Haritası is one of them. Afet is one of them as well. So that was the very first stage, right? You go there, you try to meet the emergent needs, like the, day-to-day needs, like sanitary pads, to toilet paper, to food, to, children who need, like younger kids who need specific food. Some people needed gluten-free something. So you just collect all those needs and try to meet them. But have you been to the region after the earthquake? Has anyone been there? No. Ah, you have. Where were you? For one day. Is everyone safe? Ah, you were there after the earthquake. Okay. So what was your experience there? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, thank you. It was very difficult. You know, I have been to many disaster regions, but this was nothing like my previous experiences with disasters because of the scale, because of the damage and the area it covered. So I went to the earthquake region a month after the earthquake because people like me who don't have experience with rescue are better off staying where they are and helping from there. Because the moment you go there, Hatay, for example, completely destroyed. There is no electricity, there is no water. If I go there, I'm on top of all that burden. Because I have to also eat, I have to use the toilets, I have to take a shower. So the people who are not experts in relief efforts, who don't have a lot of field experience, should better stay away the first few weeks at least. But unfortunately, many people just jump in their cars and try to go there. So that created crazy traffic. There was already no gas, as you can imagine. There was no gas in the region. So there are cars lined up for kilometers and people trying to go there saying, maybe I will just make soup for someone. So, you know, you're better off where you are. I was here with several other people trying to coordinate from where I was and also trying to coordinate the donations from overseas. So many people also tried to connect, some people donate, some people wanted to donate in cryptocurrencies. So we were trying to open crypto accounts for NGOs. So there were several other needs. So the first phase, as you can imagine, were tents. So you have to move people in tents, at least. Simultaneously, you have to secure sanitary conditions. So what we did was, I personally made these calls so I can talk about them in detail. We had a meeting with Vitra, Eczacıbaşı, like 3 days after the earthquake, and said we need toilets and showers. I got together with their innovation team and I said, this is what we need. So the showers need to have a dry space and this, that. And a week later, they had the prototype of what we needed. And a week later, it was in the region because as you can imagine, in disaster zones, there is also a lot of diseases spreading. So if you don't secure sanitary conditions as soon as you can, then you meet other problems. So that's why first there were 10 towns, inside them toilets where people who were placed there could use, also volunteers. There were hundreds of volunteers helping out. But then we were thinking about, okay, people cannot live in tents, right? So we have to start a more like semi-permanent, temporary permanent, but decent living spaces. So this was a completely empty field. So we this also I will talk about this, like, because you may think, okay, you just went there and took the space. No. So Afet, the government organization in charge of disaster relief, has a map of empty regions, and you go and ask them, like, this is what I'm planning to create here. So, and then several organizations, NGOs, companies secured spaces for themselves. So, but this is all happening under the watch of Afet. So you cannot, none of us could actually go there and say, this is what I'm doing here. So what we did was we asked for the space and it was secured. So it was close to our depot, our warehouse. And it was, just first we flattened, I mean, you know all these things much better than I did. But the space was turned into a flat zone. I don't know, what's the technical term for that? So it was like all hilly and so first it was like, yeah. And then we had to find a water source. So these are very new for us, arkadaşlar. None of us had experience with this, like, but you know, we worked with UNDP during that time. We found a water source, and then the water went to chemical analysis, and it was found to be safe. And then once the water was secured, so the pipelines were installed. So that's how that was the very first step. We opened this space like about 2 months ago. So this is what it looks like. Unfortunately, there is no green. In our initial plan, there was also a lot of green. But they said there's no time. So we have to immediately move people from tents into more secure places. Also, the summer was on the way, and Hatay is extremely hot. So people were much better off inside the containers. So some of the details we asked for weren't actually, you know, we weren't able to make them happen. Okay, so this is from the opening. So as I said, like first all the pipes were installed, electricity with the help of Enerjisa, we were able to make sure there is electricity. Also, each and every container has an AC, because that's highly important. And this is the Maraş container city. We still couldn't open it officially, but people are moving in there. So this was our approach. So maybe this is the most interesting part for you from your perspective. Because yes, these spaces are temporary, but they have to be decent. They have to be really, you know, constructed from a rights-based, human rights-based perspective. So that's why we said, yes, there will be psychosocial support, mentorship, education and career development, common spaces, and culture and art spaces. So from day one, we wanted to make sure all these were covered. We also wanted like urban gardens, it's along the way, because that was part of the common spaces and community development, like, you know, projects, but it's still on the way. So community centers, this is the community center we designed. So it's very important that people get together and do things together. When they moved into these containers, it was very, very hot, as you can imagine, middle of the summer. And people were just isolated inside their containers. So that's not what you want. Yes, a container is much better than a tent. It's safe, it's clean, it has AC, but you don't want people who have suffered a massive earthquake being trapped inside a, you know, 20 square meter, 25 square meter space by themselves. So, but it was the second phase. First, everyone was moved into that container town. And you may not know about that either, so you don't choose to move in there. So Afet has lists of people who suffered the earthquake and who are without a space. So they're either in tents or in other temporary like dorms. So populations are sent to these container towns by them. So that's why until they arrive, you don't know what kind of community you'll have there. People were asking me, okay, how many children will there be? So I want to send books. Or how many pregnant women? I have no idea. Until they arrived, we had no idea who would be coming and the demographics. So the community center was built. So these gathering spaces, this is still being constructed, but very important that there is like a community center, and there could be like talks, concerts, this, that. So that's the community center inside. This is also development stage, but it's in our plan. So it's like a community kitchen and an urban garden. Because as you know, like cooking together has a healing power, right? So communities gathered around in the kitchen, cooking together, sharing experience is highly significant. So this is also along the way. But this was, as you can imagine, the second, third phase. So now everyone is in. We have a sports center. I'll talk about that community center, but the garden and the communal kitchen is still being constructed because you also don't have money to do everything at once. This is all done through donations. So we have national and international companies and people like you and me, individual donors. So as money comes, you know, you build the next stage and then the next stage. So classrooms and library, so that's also happening. As you know, schools opened, so children need space to, you know, do homeworks or, you know, work together. And music space and technology space, this is also along the way, but we secured all the computers. So as Eczacıbaşı again donated all the PCs and laptops. So they're being installed. So we have a tech space, you know, where people can actually look for work or do projects together or do their homework, and also music workshop spaces. So these are still being constructed. Dance and break studios again, but the main structure is there. But these individuals' rooms are being they're being constructed. This is already functioning. So Paribu, you probably know Paribu. Paribu is a cryptocurrency stock market, Turkish. So they support sports and also Olympic athletes. So they donated the space for sports. There are a lot of facilities, but also there are full-time instructors who teach volleyball, gymnastics for children. So they can take these classes and also get involved with sports. So that was opened in summer as well. But as you can imagine, summer in Hatay is extremely hot. So we went to open this space with like athletes and instructors, and we were supposed to play volleyball and play chess and do gymnastics in the middle of the summer on a very hot afternoon. I mean, still so many children were there, everyone was happy, there's like access to sports, but it was a challenge. Now it's much, much better because you can be outdoors much easier. So this is very important. This is what we're doing with visa, because, you know, like the second, third stage is obviously you have to go back to work and you have to start producing things. So it's not ideal that people just sit inside a container and all their needs are met and they're completely passive and not doing anything. So it's very important that they go back to an active lifestyle. So working or creating, recreating is definitely part of that story. So we also created common working places and a community center. So there are people, as you can imagine, who are professionals who lost their offices and who also lost their homes. So they're lawyers, architects, doctors. And these people can work in these co-working spaces now. You know, they're advertisers, people who hold very different professions suffered the earthquake. So now there are community centers and co-working spaces. There is a psychosocial complex. So again, each and every one of them has another, as you can see, partner, because all these are massive projects. So with Zurich Insurance Group, we had this ongoing project on psychosocial health. So it's an online platform. If you need psychosocial help, you can actually get together with a professional. So we had already started that for teachers who suffered previous disasters. But now we broadened the project. So now this project is available to everyone affected by the earthquake. And there is a physical center. So this is the psychosocial health center inside the complex. So far, this is what we're doing in the region. So do you have any questions? Because then I will want to development phase, or maybe I will completely, you know, finish the story and then you ask the questions. So that's what you're doing locally at the earthquake hit zones, right? But there are also towns which are not destroyed that badly. So we decided to build reconstruction centers, hubs actually, through which we will help also reconstruct these towns which are affected. So if you haven't been to Hatay, Maraş, it's very hard to imagine, but the roads are destroyed. Hatay airport is still not operational. So it's not very easy to start a redevelopment, restructuring project there. So you have to build these centers at a relatively secure spaces. So that's what we're doing now. So we're doing, okay. We're running a project called RRDC, and this what we're doing is like the less affected towns, Antep and Adana. So we will have two centers, regional recovery centers, operating in the earthquake region, but Adana and Antep are the least affected. So we decided to put these centers in these towns. And there, you know, through public institutions, organizations, we're trying to create jobs. We're trying to somehow, you know, make the space again like what it used to be, a dynamic trades town, tourism, all that. But it would be impossible to do that inside the earthquake hit towns. Although these towns are also hit, but not at the same scale. So we're opening these centers. I was there. So capacity building, tech support, you know, reliable information, all that. But that's just beginning. I was in Antep last month. So we found a space, you know, an office space, and we're beginning that. So there we'll focus on economic development, social and cultural development, and community development. So these two zones will be actually focusing on these three pillars and trying to reconstruct the whole region and rebuild the whole region. I mean, if you like, we can go into details. For example, the cooperatives were destroyed. There were many cooperatives in the region. They're destroyed, most of them. So making sure they go back in business, you know, they create value-added products and again, you know, sell them. Okay, so this is all very much detailed. So this is where we were. Yes, so that's where I'll stop. So as you can see, like the first stage was emergency response, recovery, and now we're somewhere between redevelopment of the disaster region and still trying to make sure the container towns are livable spaces, at least for 2-3 years, because it looks like at least for 2-3 years they will be there living in the container town. So I'll stop here. But if you have questions, I'm sure you do. I will continue. And this is all new for us, bear in mind. So we never started a regional development center before. We're very much experienced in development, but not development after a massive disaster. So we're learning with partners. We're partnered up with several international, national organizations, chambers of commerce, and locals as well. Okay, I'll stop here and take your questions. So thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you. You may need the mic.
Hello. Okay.
Yes.
In the first part where you were explaining the container cities, there was this community center, and inside of it, there's many of activities and different, let's say, functions. But one of the things that is in my head as a question, so Hatay specifically, I would say, have their own culture and needs, right?
Of course, yeah, of course.
So while providing such an activities, is it, subconsciously, in the planning process at least? So developing such, let's say, community centers. So does the culture play a role inside of it?
Like, I'm not sure if I'm getting your question right. Like, can you rephrase it? Because
Yeah, sure.
I'm not sure I have a clear idea about what you're asking.
To give an example, for example, let's say, this is just a hypothesis, let's say.
Yeah.
People in Hatay are not, let's say, into dancing.
Sure.
So there is, for example, a dancing group. So does that mean that we are putting in account the cultural needs as well?
Of course, yeah, of course. So you have to always work with the locals, right? So first ask them what you need. So that's just an idea, a space, so the music room, for example. Children are open to anything and everything, but you still ask them what they need. So we don't immediately start saying,
there's
classic organ classes there, right? But they're designed as activity spaces. So there could be folk dance, there are all kinds of things. Like people ask for, whatever they need. For example, we started gymnastics because gymnastics is the most basic sport. So we have a full-time gymnastics instructor, volleyball, football, and things. But they came and asked for bikes. They said like, I think we need bikes more because we can. So then the next stage was to provide bikes. Of course, you want to listen to them. But from our perspective, like whatever will bring the community together and help them move out of the tiny containers is a community center. So this is our drawings of what it is, right? But
community center, or they just do activities?
I mean, they do activities. They gather, they sit, chat, read, gossip for the time being.
Actually, you answered my second question, since they also play a role in planning, which is great for me at least. The third one is volunteers who go there. So I have some of my friends who went in the third day or something to these areas, and through their experiences they were telling me that there's other countries who brought their own stuff and their own needs. Some of them were more advanced than others and whatnot. They also brought their food. But let's say, as for the Turkish, let's say, volunteers, so the plan is to move them to the container cities, right? If I'm not mistaken. Is there any, let's say, plan for how long they will be staying over there, and then the residents will be moving in afterwards, or how does that work?
You're asking about the volunteers where they live, right? So during the first few weeks, it was all chaos. Like total chaos. So disaster relief people from all around the world were there. Obviously, some of them had very good equipment, their own tents, their own, their food for 2 weeks. And some people were just there, here I come, and not knowing what to do. So some of them were much more experienced with disaster relief. Some of them were clueless. So the first few weeks, total chaos. So everyone was trying to do something, which I understand. Like we all wanted to do something. But later, when the 10 towns were being formed, of course, the volunteers were also staying inside the tents. So the first time I was telling about the toilets or showers I asked for from Eczacıbaşı, they were actually for the volunteers. So they were living in the tents together with the people affected by the earthquake. So some of these tents were really nice, UNHCR tents. Some of them were Kızılay tents. Some of them were really crappy tents. Some of them were very good against rain, wind. Some of them were very fragile. And eventually we ran out of tents. So there was need for tents, more need, but there were no tents available. So we had to bring some tents from Dubai and have the plane land to Adana, İncirlik Airport, the US base in Adana. Because it was all chaos again, because if you had them delivered to Istanbul, only Afet could actually do the clearance from the customs, so. And now, if you're asking about now volunteers also live inside the tents or the containers still. So if you're working as a volunteer in our container town, for example, if you're teaching there, if you're a gymnastics teacher, if you're a social worker, you're also living inside a container, yes. But also the semi-permanent people are also living there. I don't exactly know about the rebuilding of houses efforts, but as far as I can see, no one is moving into a permanent house anytime soon.
So approximately, let's say, how much or how many residents do they stay in these container cities? The current
So
one,
like
at least.
500.
500. That's too little.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry for what the.
No, but there are several of them. So this is the one.
That was only one of them.
No, this is the one, because this is my experience, the one we built. There's so many of them.
Okay, I see.
They're
But
like
that size only around 500. Let's say, okay.
500 to 1,000, 2,000. That's not, yeah, but that's a community, right?
Yeah.
So manageable community, safe.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I really
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. So there are many container towns.
So many. It's
Okay, so my question is regarding the construction process of the community center and other buildings. I want to ask about the construction materials used in this project. I mean, how was it provided to the site? Is it a local material from local factories, let's say, or provided from other countries or cities, or recycled from existing buildings? So,
I wish it were recycled and bio material. No, but it's provided from locals mostly because up until that time we were able to understand what's available, what's not. But it's not. Is it ideal? No. I wish they were, recycled, upcycled material, but we tried to use natural material as much as we could. There is a lot of wood in the community center, but containers, as you know, are like,
it was locally provided.
yeah, yes. But if you have specific questions, I don't have an answer. If you ask about the details of the, but I can find out. I can find out and let you guys know. Because we have all that data, but I'm not, I don't have that info here today. Because I was mostly interested in, will there be a garden? That was my obsession. Where's the garden? Why isn't there any green? Yeah, it was like, especially in a very hot town like Hatay, that there are no trees.
So thank you so much, Itır Hocam. It was really very valuable for all of us, since in our graduate studio here we are trying to deal with this problem of interim housing, which is a kind of providing shelters for 1 to 5 years of period for volunteers or people who are going to be there for, shorter periods of time. So thanks for sharing that knowledge. The question that I have is about that container, city or neighborhood that you develop with needs map. Since there are many numbers and there are different container settlements too, as far as we know, Are there any, I don't know, architects or designers in the team? Yeah, how do you plan to place all these numbers of containers next to each other? Because that is a topic that we are trying to problematize in our studio at the same time. And the second thing is, what type of families are there? You know, is it only one type of container just placed next to each other, or is there any way of developing a certain reasoning process for, you know, different crowded families or single people who are going to use those spaces for sheltering purposes? So is there any kind of organization that could be kind of luxurious perhaps at the moment, but could it be engaged with this topic of, you know, giving a very, you know, quick response to such requirements in such, you know, really discomforting settings where we really do need relief in many aspects at the same time? So green is one dimension that you were talking, but at the same time, how it is organized. Yeah, the providing certain services like water, electricity is trying to plug that, you know, settlement to the required services, but still there are many humanitarian needs. So were there any designers or architects or any other professionals?
Yeah, there were definitely designers and architects. So there were construction people. So we got help from construction companies like Atışık in Bursa and Nef. So their teams helped us out because none of us have that experience. We have experience with disaster management or human development or, you know, other psychosocial help, but no idea about building a space. So we worked with them, but no one was ready for this. Like maybe with this experience, we could actually have teams who are ready to respond when necessary. Because with the Hatay example or Maraş, it was all like chaos, and you know, some companies saying maybe I will do this, and then someone is calling a friend who's an architect, the other is calling someone who's a psychosocial worker, you know, so it shouldn't be that way. We didn't have teams ready to immediately respond. So people did what they can, you know, like me calling Vitra. So because everyone wants to do something, but there is no plan, there is no master plan. So maybe we should work on a master plan, preparing for disasters or anything which would require us to move into a temporary settlement, you know. Or there were people who would call me and say, why don't you build tiny houses? I'm like, no. You know, we can't build tiny houses right now. Like it's, you know how much one costs? And so people had also, there were some like unrealistic fantasies. You know, I have a group of friends who are like, why don't we build this like beautiful tiny house set up? I'm like, no, that's not feasible at the moment. Maybe another phase. Or people would send me like these amazing upcycled, you know, materials, and how are we going to, you know, acquire them? Like it was impossible. Even the containers, again, we ran out of containers after a while. So some companies were trying to build containers. Some people are trying to export them, import them. It was crazy because no one was ready for a disaster at this scale. So maybe, yes, you know, we should have a plan. We should have, you know, optional scenarios, like scenario 1, this is what we do. Scenario 2, if the scale is this, we have, because this was, I must say, you know, although we had the disaster platform, although we tried to work with municipalities, chambers of commerce, still just, you know, what you could do. Koç has container towns. I mean, maybe you can have a field trip and visit them and see who's doing what, what's the best, you know, what could be modeled, you know, and get ideas.
And my second question is, how could you just provide the site? It was from the governmental authorities that they offered you, you may use that site?
Afet. So Afet had a list. I mean, like now looking back, it's just kind of very strange to remember all those things, right? They had this it's like a map, right? Of empty spaces, and say some construction company would say, I want that zone. UNDP says, I want. They say, okay, you can have it. So you would have to provide like a very rough scenario of what you plan to do, and then you would secure the space. But of course, you know, it's all done with the government authority. So you put in all the money, all the effort, all the volunteers. But again, you do this with the government. So Afet gave the space to us because we had the expo, the depot right next to there. And this is where we had the tents and the volunteers were staying there. We were all there. And then gradually, you know, containers were donated. So some of the volunteers moved into containers. And then we told Afet we're already there. You know, we know the area, and that's how we can secure the space. So then we worked with UNDP on the infrastructure. So many partner organizations, and that's also chaos. Not easy, you know. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
explanations. I just wanted to ask you about, weren't there any other option rather than containers for making the shelters?
For the time being, no. They were either tents or containers. Like, what do you have in mind? If you could give me examples, then I could tell you why it didn't work or why it wasn't preferred.
For example, in studio, we were considering other options rather than containers. Maybe the other options may be more sustainable or more comfort than these containers. It was a question mark in my head that why you choose this option.
Because they were the most available and comparatively cheaper, and also because you need them in the crazy numbers, like thousands and thousands and thousands of them. So designing a sustainable or more comfortable or better new product and then manufacturing it would be almost impossible for that scenario. For a smaller scale disaster, that could be done. But in this case, imagine like a few weeks later, we ran out of all the tents in the country. There were not enough tents even. And then containers, ran out of containers immediately. So because the need was so high, and these were already available, so that we went the easiest way, the quickest way. But if we were ready, if we were prepared, if we had manufacturers who were also designing and manufacturing these like better spaces, but also you need donations, right? So they tend to be, as you can imagine, more expensive. And, you know, they cost so much, millions and millions and millions. So it's hard to come up with that. Also, you don't want to create hierarchies within these towns too, right? So one is like super pretty luxury X, the other like only standard. So you also want some kind of standard. There's several things to consider. But I understand. I wish, yes, they were like more natural material, prettier, you know, aesthetically more appealing.
And the second question is, how long did it take to build a town like this?
Okay, 5-6 months. Yeah. The very first one was around 5 months. So Marash is very well open it, but already the population moved in.
You explained about the way of providing water. What about other sources that people need? For example, like electricity.
Electricity, yes. So we worked with Enerjisa. So electricity was, the infrastructure was obviously installed before the containers were placed. So water, electricity was secured. Then we didn't have Wi-Fi when we opened it. And that was also like the complaint, why don't we have Wi-Fi yet? But that was also secured, so that was the second phase. But yes, AC was very important. That's why electricity, air conditions, for at least, decent living conditions. Yeah.
Thank you so
So again, sure, we worked with providers. So it's almost like, creating a village. Like you all these details you never think about, right? You always assume there will be electricity or there'll be pipes. So beginning from scratch was very interesting experience. Nothing. But I'm telling you, should. That's why maybe a field trip would be good, because some of them, moved people in without securing water, and there were many towns, container settlements without water. Because they tried to have depots, install depots, this and that, and bring in water from elsewhere. Again, chaos. Because we worked with UNDP, so we took the necessary steps at least for basic needs. But then also through our partnerships, they were constantly getting sanitary material like toilet papers, pads, shampoos, this, that too. But you don't want people to endorse that kind of lifestyle and live until the end of their lives on ready money, right? They have to, as soon as possible, move back to an active lifestyle. So eventually, the help will be cut. And then these like cooperatives will help them out with starting cooperatives, products, this, that.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, although it's not a luxury life, it's an easy life, you sit all day and food comes and you play a little basketball and then you could just sit around, watch Netflix. But it's also not part, as part of the healing process, you also have to be active, creating. There was another.
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
Hello. My first question is, how long are people expected to be living in this place?
At least 2 years, 2 to 3. But in the Istanbul earthquake, some people lived in these like temporary settlements for up to 5 years, up to 5.
Okay, and the second one is related to it. After the disaster is over, what do you do with those settlements?
That's a very important question. I honestly don't know. I don't know. And the amount of waste, I really don't know. I mean, they will probably be moved to other places which need them, but I really don't know. And I don't know what because maybe we didn't have anything at this scale before, like these many container towns, like a whole town of container towns. You really have to, that's why you need to see it before you get the whole picture. It's huge. So I honestly don't know, because I'm constantly thinking about the waste problem too. They're massive, they're like temporary cities almost.
Thank you.
Yeah, we need to find out, and hopefully there's an answer. Because you see sometimes with these like efforts, you don't even think about what's going to happen. Yeah, we just have to put this in, so people are not out in the wind, in the rain, in the heat. And then what's next? Hopefully there's an answer.
I think since we are living in an earthquake area, I think maybe, I don't know, we may found area that we can put all of these containers in. So when we need it, I hope we won't, but if we need it, we can use it from there. But I think they can do something like that. I don't think it's
secure them
so
in a
hard.
depot, right? Secure them in a depot and they need it.
So when we need it, if we need it, I hope we don't, but if we need it, what will we do? Like, we're gonna make these
Sure.
containers again
And then get donations. Yeah. I mean, the tents were that way. So there were many tents secured at different depots and they were brought in. But you see, there were pretty much no containers.
Actually, my mom and my family lived in Adapazarı when
The
earthquake happened.
earthquake happened, yeah.
And my mom is a teacher. She was teaching there. She was teaching in the tent. She was talking about how hard it was for them because it was so cold at one point, and it was really hard for them.
No,
Like,
I can
you have to
imagine.
get,
Sure,
they
sure.
had to put soba, and it's, I don't know. It was-
Dangerous too.
yeah,
not
it's so
safe.
dangerous, and it was a huge chaos, she says. So I think containers are much more safer, and it's much more like a house,
It
actually.
is. I stayed in one for almost a week when I was there. It is like, it's like a small house, you know, I mean, I had a heater. I had my, mat and I was in my sleeping bag. But it's like a secure tiny space because it doesn't get wet or anything. So you can heat it. And if you have an air condition, you can cool it.
I feel like it has been 24 years.
Yeah.
And we still need tents for this. Like,
Yeah.
they still had to teach in tents, and I found it very stupid in a way because
You
I
think
mean,
how this is possible, right?
yes, I mean, they lived through it. It was so painful. Even the teaching was very painful. The university students, they had to prepare for the exam.
Sure.
I mean, I think it's just so, I don't know. Maybe after that they could have made these because they could have made containers back then too, and they could have secured them in an area, like maybe a huge area, but
Yeah.
we will need, I mean, if we need it, which it was expected back then too. So, it will be much more easier for people because in the earthquake, some people died because they had to go to their houses because it was, I don't know, cold, or like it was something they needed was in there.
They needed, and they were hit by the second earthquake when the buildings collapsed.
Nobody gets
Yeah.
that second earthquake may happen. So I think it's just, they're just wasting lives in that way. I mean, we couldn't think about it in that time. That's what I think. And after this, I don't think like wasting them, like destroying them. I don't know. It's a waste because I feel like we may need it.
You may need, yeah. I mean, some other part of the world may need it, to secure people from some other disaster, like extreme weather conditions, tornadoes, this, that. Yeah.
These containers are so important, I think. And I don't know, I think we shouldn't waste them
No,
for
I agree.
anyone in the world.
No, I agree, because that's the basic decent space, right? A tent isn't, because also, anything and everything can enter the tent. Tent cannot be even a temporary living space. It's just a few days, you go camping, you live in a tent, but
it's not a humane thing. My
Yeah,
mom
yeah.
says like they had to live in tents for like months.
yeah.
And like they had to be together. It was so tough. I mean, living in a tent, even in cold
Sure.
weather, is so tough, I think. Like, I don't know.
In the heat, it's the same. It's as bad.
Yeah, it's also bad.
Yeah.
They had, I think, a way should have, or will. I hope they will find a way to
No,
not.
I hope so too.
waste
Maybe you
this.
will all be involved in the efforts.
Hopefully.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I would love that.
We each have expertise and knowledge in several different fields, so maybe you'll be part of the efforts.
Itır Hocam, thank you very much for your time and explaining us all the efforts in a very clear and structured way. I was wondering, is there still high circulation of volunteers? And the second question is related, how would you describe their common needs? Because you talk about the community center. If there would be a community center for the volunteers, what would it include?
Okay, thank you. So we don't have as many volunteers in the region as we used to, because when we had depots, right, when we couldn't meet the basic needs, there would be volunteers there just separating, labeling, and taking these stuff like, clothes and other things to where people were. Because now they're in the cities, most of them are in these settlements. We don't need as many volunteers, and most of the volunteers were university students. So they're back to school. As you know, last year the schools were online, and still the students could be there volunteering. We obviously still need volunteers to do the community work, psychosocial work, this, that. But if you live there as a volunteer, that's also a challenge. It's the first few months, the volunteer is like, okay, this is like I'm helping out with rescue and relief. But now permanently living in a container would be also difficult for a volunteer. But there's always need for volunteers, and some companies are also sending volunteers. Say, Sabancı volunteers go in the groups of 50 and do something and come back. Also arts, there are we had a project with Netflix. So a lot of volunteer actors and actresses would go there, stage plays. So there are different, volunteers. So that's also continuing. I mean, there's always need for volunteers, but permanently living there as a volunteer is a challenge. And also, is that what's needed? I'm not sure. But always need for volunteers, yeah. I mean, psychosocial help, playing with children, helping out with homework. There are TEGV centers being opened inside the container towns. So as many volunteers as a TEGV center holds, there will be volunteers there as well. So you can always check out TEGV posts about volunteers. İhtiyaç Haritası also we post, talk always. But with the schools, it's harder now because we also had some bigger students go there. We posted a link, and because every week there would be buses going to our container towns, so some of our teachers and students, faculty also went there volunteering in groups. Like usually it would be a week, because if you stay longer, it's also a challenge for you. Like psychologically, it wasn't easy the first months. Then you have to find help for the volunteers, they needed psychosocial support too. Most of them did. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. I joined quite late, but I hope maybe I can get some answers from you. So I'm wondering how or if the community centers are connected with the elementary schools or high schools around them, and how has this connection developed, and in what situation it is currently?
So now the schools opened, as you know. So last year, no schools, no one went to school basically, but there were some spaces where volunteer teachers went and worked with the children and stuff. But this year schools opened, so even in the earthquake hit areas, schools opened. Some teachers are actually living in containers, but then going to school and coming back. So students are driven to these schools in buses. In community centers, there are no schools, so they're official Milliyetim schools, MEP schools. Here, there's like helping out with homework and things. But because I haven't been to all the container towns, I don't know. But as far as I know, the schools are functioning, most of them now, operational at least. And then the children are moving back and forth between schools and containers. And many teachers are staying inside containers. Some teachers just began working there, so they were in other towns, and I also held meetings with them, so they have problems too. They're not, imagine you're moving into a new town teaching, but you're also living inside a container. So teachers also need support. But now they're back to school, so students at school age are back to school. So after school facilities like TEGV units are also open. But I would like to visit all of them too, and I know only a few of these settlements. So there could be other forms. Yes, that's yeah. Yeah, sure, yeah. They cannot have access to education, yeah, sure. So kindergarten teachers and those people, yeah, preschool teachers, volunteers. But you see, like with NGOs going in, so they also founded their own facilities in other towns, like miniature copies of whatever they do in other parts of Turkey. They moved inside container towns. So like Açık, early childhood, Açık is experiencing early childhood development, so they also different centers. But is it enough? No, obviously, because the scale is huge. Yeah. But there is money coming in from, like, say, World Bank, EBRD. So there are also international organizations really trying to help out with the rescue efforts. So you have a good project as an NGO, as a company. You can also get money from the World Bank or other, people and companies to provide, or international organizations who have secured certain budgets to help out with the relief efforts. So if you have a good project, you can always apply. There is money actually, which is good news. Yeah. So World Bank has a huge fund. EBRD, we're working for several projects. We're working with EBRD. And we have a cat visitor too. Interested. And like, I didn't talk about animals, but there were a lot of, as you can imagine, non-human earthquake sufferers. So inside these even tent towns and our warehouse, there were many animals residing full-time, and there were many volunteer vets. So if one of our cats is upset or looks sick, so you would immediately call one of the vets in the region, because there were volunteer vets who were in the region, so 24/7, going around these 10 towns and trying to help out with the well-being of the animals. And also many people adopted. So we brought one to Dastas and named him Künefe. So we have a Künefe, a dog. People adopted, like, from parrots to anything and everything you can imagine in the region. So there are many very sweet stories too, really heartwarming stories. But you should have seen that. So there's so many, like, cats and dogs and vets constantly coming in. I remember I made the call. There was a cat called Behlül, and I called the vet, like, Behlül doesn't eat the food today. Can you please come check Behlül out? Really interesting stories. Now you can smile about them. I mean, at the time it was difficult for all of us, but.
I got like about two questions that are somehow interconnected to each other. first, thank you for the, this
Sure,
guide,
sure.
going there, and your insight about the whole situation is very valuable for us. I have been conducting a research on a city in Japan, Tohoku, which witnessed also a very disastrous natural disaster in 2011, mainly a tsunami and an earthquake. On the scale wise, almost similar to Hatay in terms of disaster. One thing that I just focused on in the research is that after, let's say 5 months, a year now that has passed, what are the things that they learn from? And then in terms of this, quick response in the shelters, the material they have used, or even things they have experimented in terms of greenery and agriculture. Because as we all know, Japan relies a lot on agriculture, actually. Yeah, in terms of feeding families in there. And the soil was ruined because of the tsunami. It ruined a lot of agricultural fields. So the thing is, after that quick response, there was actually a couple of architects who designed these similar container cities. And after this, there is a documentation, national documentation, that shows the aftermath after like 5 years, people living in these container cities. Most of the time, they reflect on the idea of being, developing the fear of, going out, interacting with others, building social
ties again.
Yes, exactly. And also they complain mostly about this whole architecture of these container cities. And I know for a fact, because one of my friends spent 4 months in Hatay and Kahramanmaraş. Yes, and she's actually here also. So they have, and she documented a lot of photos and showed it to us, where they experimented with different materials in Hatay, being, for example, super adobe, or even hay and mud, which is like a traditional way of building. What I'm curious about is, now we passed this almost a year lifetime. What is the, let's say, optimal building material? Since now we kind of have a time, we kind of sustain the situation. I know it's not like perfectly sustained, but we have it calmed down, under control, and now we're trying to build this optimal interim housing. So right now, from this evaluation, what is the most proper material to use, or proper building method? What about agriculture in these areas? Because in Tohoku, that was one of the main miss-outs, actually, that the resident had to, try to find ways to create these like urban gardens, integrate them into their balconies or to their courtyard shared spaces.
As for the building material, I don't have an answer, because that's not my area of expertise. Like, I wish I knew, but I mean, I know this is not ideal, but I really have no idea about what the better would be. I mean, if it were up to me, I would use much more natural material, at least, to make it more human and humane, and also in contact with nature. And I would make sure there's more green space. So as you saw in the pictures, there's pretty much none. But we have these like urban garden projects now, like a community garden. So that's happening already. But as for the materials, so probably a few years from now, we would have to go and ask all these people who live there, and the people who designed, the people who also experienced what happened to them in summer, winter, in the wind, and that, and then ask them, like, would you rather have used X material? Because still, I think it's early, because it's almost like there was no choice, right? So it wasn't like we have this amazing material and we have this crappy one, and let's go for the crappy. Pretty much like what was doable was done almost. And everyone moved in somewhere at the moment. There are only people who have, say, animals or some kind of plantation. They want to be in a tent right next to that. Those people refused to move into any settlement. They said, I have this here and I want to live close by. Or many people moved out of Hatay or Maraş, into other towns. But I think a few years later, even, you know, like maybe next year, we could go ask similar documentary or, you know, I think that's very important. We have to learn from this experience.
So my second question was actually related to what you just said also a bit earlier about trying not to create this segregation or comparison between different villages. So right now we're, you know, planning to design this interim housing, and we're trying to design it in the most optimal way, you know, plan-wise, etc., function, community, part in the whole system. I'm now being a little bit more conscious after what you said that after designing this, let's say, optimal solution.
Yeah, perfect.
How would that even reflect on these other current existing container cities? Should we adopt maybe something similar to what they exist so they don't feel too different, or should we go and improve their life and or change what they have over there within, you know, not removing everything, but like an intervention in some sort?
I think the effort is still very important, that you actually design something better. And because this won't be the last disaster, right? And there will be others. And if the container towns are modeled after what you have created, you know, it will be much better. But the thing is, like, there are inequalities everywhere. So even inside a prison, there are, you know, we create inequalities everywhere. So someone who has access to more resources is better connected, gets better treated everywhere. So here, to prevent that from happening, they said, we will decide who moves in where, okay? But still, obviously, someone who knows X and then move there. So it's impossible not to create any hierarchy. Obviously, some people will be living in better conditions, even inside a severely hit town like Hatay. So I would say, like, don't refrain from what you have in mind. Please do that. And let's see what happens. You know, it's it would give an idea, like, about an alternative. And also, is it financially feasible? Is it doable? It could be ideal, but sometimes the ideal is not affordable ever. So also that will come into question. And you will find donors probably, but this is all done through donations. People donated money. Some people may want to donate for a, you know, better living space.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.